Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nonprofit Spotlight series. This is Grayson Harris. Today, we are pleased to be joined by Crystal Hall. She is the Regional Director of East Operations at the Epilepsy Foundation, and their organization is doing great work to support individuals living with epilepsy, both through community engagement, support, advocacy, and education. Crystal, thank you for joining us today, and tell me a little bit more about the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Some of the work that we do, we have seizure recognition and first aid training that is all about seizures, recognizing the different types of seizures, and training individuals, like whether you have epilepsy, the community, the organizations throughout our communities where people with epilepsy live or have a loved one with epilepsy in that support so they don't feel left alone in traveling through this journey.
Incredible. And specifically within your region, the director of East Operations. Tell me a little bit more about the need within those communities and how y'all are there to and meet that.
Yeah. So depending on it, the needs are great. We do have a high need of just having someone to talk to support living with epilepsy. There's needs for grants, needs for prescription assistance, or just having a connected to connect with an individual or even a caregiver that's caring for someone. And so in the East region, we try to continue with our seizure recognition trainings. We in some of our regions or some of our states, we actually have legislation that has passed to have seizure safe schools. So
Mm.
that means that have those trainings and those teachers and bus drivers trained in seizure recognition and trainings, and first aid for those living with seizures. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, it's a vast need. And so each state has different individual direct needs, and we try to support those the best we can.
Incredible. Like zooming in on Ohio, I was reading on your site, over 140,000 people are
Yeah.
living with epilepsy in Ohio. Tell me a little bit more about what it looks like to be someone living with epilepsy, maybe for our audience that isn't as familiar with it.
Well, when we're talking about living with epilepsy, we are talking about even the social determinants of health, maybe not being able to drive if they have active epilepsy, not being able to work because people don't understand their seizures. And so in Ohio, we do have a high number. We also have a high number of epilepsy treatment centers. So being able to connect them to those resources, being able to connect them with the ideas and being able to just be resources and referrals. Seizures can look differently for people. People living with epilepsy have different types of epilepsies. And so it's not what we see in mainstream all the time. It's not just the grand mal or the tonic clonic seizures. It could be someone who might space out or stare off into and they may have what's called focal impaired awareness seizures. And so just being able to recognize that someone may need you to help them get through that seizure. And so that's why we're here to continue that.
Incredible. And on that note of like, education and advocacy, tell me both how that role is played in the school system and what that looks like in terms of educating educators and their parents, and also what that looks like at a more legislative level as well, statewide.
Yeah. So I will say they kind of go hand in hand.
Okay.
Like I said, we have over 25 states that have gone through the seizure safe school legislation. And so, and I can come from as I used to be an educator, not understanding epilepsy and not having the training to help a student that may have a seizure in my classroom and not even understanding that there were different types. And so, one of the things that we do know is that a good portion of students will have their first time seizure at school.
Mm.
And so being able to train the teachers, not just a teacher and not just having a nurse available, but training all that will be impacted, which is the whole school. And having all of them trained in understanding seizure recognition and how to help, including the bus drivers, including substitutes. And so for Ohio, we passed Sarah's Law. And Sarah's Law states that all bus drivers, all teachers, all admins, substitutes, coaches, all of them have to be trained in seizure recognition. And as a matter of fact, it has to be implemented by the end of this month.
Wow. Okay. How
Yeah.
how is that deadline as it approaches? How has that been? Have y'all been heightened activity?
Yes, it has been high activity. The great thing about it is that we can do the trainings virtually. Honestly, there's only so many of us that can do it within a time frame, but we also have on demand
Mm.
trainings, and there are other people who are able to train and do it. So as long as they have a 60-minute to at least approved by the Ohio Education Department, we don't have to do it in person. It's not just me doing the training. So that's the great thing about the way we wrote this legislation.
That's incredible. And tell me a little bit more about the benefit that, having this legislation in place is doing and having for these kids in these schools.
Yeah. So the benefit is that parents can send their children to school knowing that they will be well taken care of, that people will understand it. There is something called a seizure action plan that we really advocate for, and we put that also into that legislation. So to make sure that those seizure action plans are on hand for all of the teachers to understand it. And that seizure action plan says when it is emergency for that student, when to give what's called rescue therapy, what that seizure looks like for that individual student, and things like that. So that's the great thing about it. Parents can make sure that if their child needs a 504 or an IEP, that that seizure action plan is also put into that 504, that IEP. So it's just a really great tool and knowledge to have for those parents. It gives them at least
Yeah.
some ease of mind to say, I know that my child will be taken care of, especially when the nurse is not there.
Tell me a little bit more about your background. You've been at the organization for over 5 years. How has it been, moving up through kind of the organization, and what are some lessons that you picked up along that way?
Yeah. So you're right. As of this summer, July, I've been here 6 years.
Okay.
When I came into the foundation, I came in as the education manager in July of 2019. So my job as the education manager was just to do the educational trainings, to go out into the schools and to the community and do the trainings. In 2020, is it 2020? 2020, COVID happened. And so there was some reorg, and I got the position as executive director for Ohio and Indiana.
Mm.
And so with that, of course, my job expanded from not just being able to do the trainings, but also being able to develop the relationships with the individuals living with epilepsy, the donors, the sponsors, the pharmaceutical reps, and things like that.
Yeah.
Then in 2023, 24, I got the position as regional director. So I think some of that had to do with the way that I build the relationships, and how my care and concern for not just the individuals, but even for the organization, that organizational mind and order is what kind of helped. But I also do have a degree in public health administration. So my master's and doctorate are both in public health administration. So I think that also gave me that mindset as I move through something that is really a public health concern.
Mm. Yeah, you sound uniquely qualified with that kind of background, both as the education space and the public health, stepping in, growing in the nonprofit organization. It
Yeah.
sounds to me like relationships were kind of at the key of the success that you're having in your two states. Tell me a little bit more about some of those first conversations, both with the members that they'll service, but then also those relationships that you built with the donors as well.
Yeah, some of those relationships is just, how it impacts, who I am at my core, and how it impacts me being at the Epilepsy Foundation, lessons learned, whether good or bad, and just being transparent about, and that goes even with the donors, being transparent, being honest, and having honest conversations. Where would their donation best be impactful? Things like that, and being honest with them to say, in order for us to do this, this is what it looks like. And also being thankful and thanking them for being a part of it, but not just for their money, just being thankful for being a donor to a situation or to a health concern. It's been a journey. It's still going to be a journey as we recognize that epilepsy is the third or fourth most neurological concern, but yet we still don't do enough. I won't say that we don't do enough, but people don't see us enough, and they
Mm.
still don't understand it enough to say, to give us the yes that we need. And so, still making sure that we are impactful We share the stories. We encourage our donors and our individuals to share their stories because donors also being able to share their story of why they donate is also important.
Thank you for sharing that. And as our nonprofit audience looks to also try and implement these tactics that you were kind of speaking to, what would be kind of a, a final piece of advice that you'd leave with them?
One of the things I would say is be adaptable, be flexible, especially in where we live, the systems that we know. Sometimes what has worked this year may not work next year.
Mm,
But being able to be flexible and adaptable and knowing those things outside the box.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that. And as we look to the end of the year, I know that y'all have an exciting event coming up. I believe November 14th.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
So, November is Epilepsy Awareness Month, and so our theme for November for is All In. And so, in Ohio, on November 14th in Dayton, we have Brunch for Brains coming up, where Michael Liner, who's an attorney in the Columbus area and also an epilepsy warrior, he lives with epilepsy. He is going to come and speak about the ins and outs of Social Security and disability, the application process, and how his firm can help. But we're also going to be able to connect individuals with one another as, to meet other people living with
Mm,
epilepsy, even hear about to a panel of people. A doctor is going to talk about from diagnosis to disability, having someone from a bank come in to talk about ABLE and I'm on disability. How can I manage my funds?
yeah.
Being that support.
Incredible. Crystal, thank you for coming on and sharing more about the incredible work that you're doing for your region. And I hope that everybody comes out and shows out for that big event.
Yeah. Thank you again for having me.